Good afternoon, everyone. For the past 5 years, we have anxiously watched the Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell trials. 5 years ago, 2 children went missing, JJ and Tylee Ryan. They were reported missing in November 2019. The last confirmed sighting of JJ was on September 23rd, 2019, at a school in Rexburg, Idaho, before his mother, Lori Vallow, withdrew him. I mentioned she was considered homeschooling him. Prior to that, Tylee was seen approximately 2 weeks before that. Today, we have received some justice for JJ, Tylee, and Tammy Daybell. About a half an hour ago, the jury came back and sentenced Chad Daybell. We're going to take a look at that now.
Versus Chad Guy Daybell, concluding the special sentencing hearing that's being conducted where the court intends to sentence the defendant on the counts in the amended indictment, including the insurance fraud counts. Is the state ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
It's ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Very well, Mr. Bailiff, if you'd please have the jurors brought in.
Yes, Your Honor.
When your business booms, Nexus.
They're bringing the jury in at this time. They're not saying anything right at this moment, so let me know here in a minute. I'll let you know when they're talking and see if you can hear them.
All right, please.
They look stressed, the defense team.
Police officer, account for, Your Honor.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we are back on the record on CR 2221-1623, continuing the special sentencing proceeding. The jury has returned its special verdict. The court would note that pursuant to Idaho Code 18-4004, which is the punishment for murder statute in Idaho, that crime in murder of the first degree can be punished by death. And under Idaho Code 19-2515, subsection 7A, that states that if the jury finds that a statutory aggravating circumstance exists and no mitigating circumstances exist, which would make the imposition of the death penalty unjust, the defendant will be sentenced to death by the court. The court's reviewed the findings of the jurors in the special verdict form. They've taken their time through these deliberations to return that verdict. And so the court will proceed with sentencing first on counts 1 through 6. And again, this is an unusual hearing because the sentencing hearing's already been taking place. We've heard from the victims through impact statements and arguments from counsel. That's already taken place. In addition, a pre-sentence investigation report is not to be ordered in these hearings, so the court does not reference that. The court then orders as follows, and this will be contained in the court's judgment at the conclusion of the case. As to count one, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of Tylee Ryan upon the jury's finding of guilty and return of the special verdict form. The jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count one, the defendant is sentenced to death. On count two, the first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count two, sentences the defendant to death. On count three, the conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and grand theft by deception for the murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count three, sentences the defendant to death. On count four, first-degree murder of J.J. Vallow, the jury finding beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count four, sentences the defendant to death. On count five, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell, the jury having found beyond a reasonable doubt and having returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count five, sentences the defendant to death. On count six, the first-degree murder charge, the murder of Tammy Daybell, the jury having found beyond a reasonable doubt and returned the special verdict that the aggravating circumstances when weighed against the mitigating circumstances do not make the imposition of the death penalty unjust. The court therefore, on count six, sentences the defendant to death. The court's next going to take up counts 7 and 9 on the insurance fraud counts. Before I do that, from the state, are there any questions regarding the court's judgment as it relates to counts 1 through 6?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Questions from the defense?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, moving on to insurance fraud, then the court will note that I am required to go through a sentencing proceeding on this. These are separate counts that have not been determined in the special verdict form by the jurors. Some brief procedural history. Mr. Daybell was charged by amended indictment with counts 7 and 9 insurance fraud under Idaho Code 41293, which is a felony. Mr. Daybell pled not guilty to those counts on June 9th, 2021. Thereafter, this trial was held, and as part of the findings of the jury in their verdict, they did find the defendant guilty of both of those counts. The court has considered, in lieu of a pre-sentence investigation report, the information that I've heard throughout this trial. I also heard information regarding these charges in the previous trial held last year against co-defendant Lori Vallow. I've also heard information received during the special sentencing proceeding relating to those counts as well, and have considered that information in lieu of a pre-sentence investigation report. And I'll also note the defendant waived the pre-sentence investigation report and is permitted to do that, and the court can allow that under Criminal Rule 32A. At this time, then, before I move forward with the sentencing on counts 7 and 9, I will inquire of the state. Is the state wishing to make any sentencing recommendation as it relates to count 7 or 9?
And Your Honor, just for clarification, were the insurance frauds count 8 and 9?
As listed in the amended indictment, they are listed as count 7 and count 9.
Thank you. Co-counsel just clarified for me on that. Your Honor, the state is prepared to make a statement. First, I would indicate for the record that in relation to the sentencing hearing, the sentencing portion handled yesterday, the state did make our best attempts to reach out to all statutory victims to allow them the opportunity to be heard by the court. And those that the court heard from yesterday were the ones that had wished to make impact statements. While not directly related to the insurance fraud, I did just want to make a clear record of that. In relation to the insurance fraud charges, in light of the sentence that has been imposed by this court and by the recommendation of the jury in relation to the other charges, the state would indicate we think that the victim statements covered everything the state could say. While the insurance charges again are attenuated to it, we've lost 3 individuals that the state can do nothing to bring them back. And so the best we can do is move forward in seeking justice on their behalves. In relation to the insurance counts themselves, given the sentences, we would recommend this court impose jail time and have that, or prison time, impose a sentence and run it concurrent with the imposition of the other sentence by this court. I believe they carry up to 15 years in prison. We'd recommend they run concurrent with each other and with the imposition of death in this case. We would also recommend restitution in the amount of $130,000 to LifeMap and $300,000 to Primerica. As part of that, we would also recommend a waiver of any fines or court costs in this matter in order to allow restitution to be paid if any money is available to go towards that.
All right, thank you for the state's sentencing recommendations. Mr. Pryor, does the defense wish to make sentencing recommendations as to, I'll do them collectively, counts 7 and 9, the insurance fraud counts?
No, Judge, there's nothing further. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, is there any objection to the requested restitution amounts of $130,000 and $300,000?
Judge, we may need to set that out at this point, but I'll let the court know if that changes.
All right, I'll permit 30 days for the scheduling of a contested hearing on restitution. If that becomes an issue, we could conduct that hearing most likely remotely on a Zoom hearing if it becomes an issue. At this time, I will ask, because I need to on these counts, before I impose any sentence, Mr. Daybell, you do have the right of allocution, which permits you to make a statement on your own behalf in any mitigation of these offenses. Is there any statement you would like to make before I proceed with sentencing on those counts?
No.
Very well. The court then, having considered the information previously referenced, finds that pursuant to Idaho Code 41293, which under subsection 4 indicates a penalty of up to 15 years of prison. On each of those 2 counts, the court is going to impose a prison sentence of 15 years. So a 15-year sentence will be imposed on count 7. The court will take under advisement the issue of restitution requested by the state. The court will not impose any fines. The court also will impose a 15-year prison sentence on count 9. Also pursuant to the same statute, take under advisement the issue of restitution. The court will note in imposing these prison sentences that I have reviewed Idaho Code 192521, which requires me to go through certain criteria about the imposition of a prison sentence versus a possibility of parole or a lesser sentence. And I would note that the rationale for the prison sentences is that these are intertwined with the murder charges for which the death penalty has been imposed on those counts. And when the court looks at the sentencing factors under 1925-21, I would note in mitigation that Mr. Daybell has been incarcerated an extensively long time in local jail and has a previous law-abiding history, and I have considered that. I've also considered that he's always conducted himself respectfully, from what I've heard from all of the jailers that have ever interacted with him over the years that he's been incarcerated for these charges. However, the court finds under Idaho Code 2521 also that any lesser sentence would depreciate the seriousness of these offenses because this life insurance was obtained based on the murders of individuals and procuring life insurance payouts unlawfully. And because of that, it's the most serious offense, that circumstance that could lead to that. In addition, imprisonment will provide an appropriate punishment and deterrent for the defendant and others, and will also be a deterrent for the community as well. So the court having then concluded with the sentencing on that, I will not order any fines because the defendant's previously been deemed indigent and has received the death penalty on these murder counts, and find it would be futile to have an order of fines in the case. So with those remarks, then the court typically would address the defendant further, but in the special sentencing proceeding, the victim impact statement and the evidence has already demonstrated on the record, I think, the seriousness of what's occurred. And I don't find any reason to further delve into the court's rationale other than what was listed in the statute. So unless there's anything further, that will conclude the sentencing, but I will address the post-conviction issues that need to be addressed at this time. Does the state have anything further then on the sentence and count 7 and count 9?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Daybell, in this case, given the sentence that was imposed in counts 1 through 6, there's a special appellate and post-conviction procedure for capital cases, and an automatic stay may be in effect. There's a statute that's Idaho Code 192719 that sets out certain deadlines. I am providing you and counsel with a courtesy copy of that statute, but I will note a few of the deadlines that are listed in there. Under subsection 1, when the punishment of death is imposed, the time for filing an appeal shall begin to run when the death warrant is filed. Number 2, the death warrant shall not be filed until 42 days after the judgment imposing the death sentence has been filed. Number 3, within 42 days of the filing of the judgment imposing the punishment of death, the defendant must file any legal or factual challenges to the sentence of conviction. There's other important and critical deadlines that are contained within that statute, and I am going to provide a copy of that to Mr. Pryor to ensure that the defense is well advised of those post-conviction rights that would apply in this special proceeding. I'll also note that there's an additional rule, Idaho criminal rule. If you'll give me a moment, I think it's 44.2. Criminal Rule 44.2, and that's the mandatory appointment of counsel for post-conviction review after imposition of the death penalty. That rule is also applicable in your case, and a copy of the rule itself is going to be provided to you and counsel to ensure that you're well aware of any post-conviction rights you may have. With that, then, the court is going to conclude the special sentencing proceeding. Is there anything further I need to take up from the state?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Anything further from the defense?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for your abiding by the court's courtroom conduct order. We'll be in recess.
Wow. I wasn't sure that he was going to get the death penalty. After waiting all of last night for this to come down and then having them come back this morning and it taking a number of hours, I wasn't sure they were going to get there. But they did. And That is what is important. There was 3 lives lost in this, and numerous people affected. It's sad. It is so sad. Nobody wins in this situation. You know, we saw 2 of his kids, Chad's kids, testify. They believe in their father's innocence. This is going to destroy them. And we haven't heard from the other 3 because he's got a total of 5 kids. But then on the other hand, you have the families and loved ones of JG and Tylee and Tammy that will more than likely agree with this decision. I was surprised that the Parkland shooter did not get the death penalty. I'm happy in this case that the jury saw the significance of what happened to JJ and Tylee and how their bodies were treated afterwards, and how Tammy's body had to get exhumed before they could truly state how she had passed. What forms are you talking about, Honeybee? The sentencing forms? I think the sentencing forms did help them walk through the process. I think this was not everybody, not all the jurors that were picked were for the death penalty. So I'm sure there was a lot of discussion in that jury room. A lot of back and forth on whether he should get life or death. And for those jurors that did not believe in the death penalty, that had to have been one of the hardest decisions they've ever made in their life. But I think one of the things, if you don't agree with the death penalty or you don't believe in it, all you have to do is look at the pictures. Look at the pictures of what was left of Tylee Ryan. Look at the pictures of JJ. Tammy was asphyxiated. We know that now after she was exhumed. We know that she was asphyxiated, and we know that JJ was also asphyxiated by having a bag put over his head. We know that he knew what was happening to him because there were scratch marks on his neck trying to get that bag off of his neck. But the most horrendous action of all is what they did to Tylee. There's pieces of her that they still haven't found. That young lady's body was brutalized. And it was brutalized in a fashion to where the medical examiner could not state how she was killed. Yeah, the forms did advise on how to review the options, but it still comes down to beliefs, what your personal beliefs are. Did this have extravagant circumstances? Absolutely. Comes down to the person being able to actually say this man deserves to die, and having that on your conscience for the rest of your life. So I give all the jurors credit, all 12 of them, because that couldn't have been an easy decision at all. But in the end, today, we truly did get justice, finally, for JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. And that's what's important. Now, due to the prosecution requesting the death penalty a day late in Lori Vallow's Daybell's trial, she wasn't eligible for the death penalty. So she will be serving life without parole. Chad, on the other hand, he's going to get the death penalty. It's not going to be right away. There's going to be a lot of appeals filed. He'll get a new attorney for that. And those appeals will go on for years. We know how that works. But eventually, he will be put to death for his actions. And we know the third co-conspirator, Alex, Lori's brother, the day that Tammy was exhumed, he did pass away. We still don't know if that was from natural causes or not. All I know is this case has been a sad one. It's still not over. It is over when it comes to JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. Their part in this is done. They have received justice from the trial with Lori and Chad. But Lori still has more charges she's facing. She's still facing charges from her ex-husband and from her nephew. Well, not true life nephew, but her adopted nephew. They made attempts on his life. So this case is sad all around. You have two people that believed that they had powers they never had, and they made decisions together that affected several lives and that took several lives. So I agree with today's decision of death. Absolutely agree that Lori should have gotten the death penalty also, but that couldn't happen at that time. So she will serve the rest of her life in prison. But what's most important is that now those family members who are still remaining can go on and honor JJ, Tylee, and Tammy. They can start to heal finally from this and remember the good times with the three of them. If you watched the victim impact statements yesterday, there were several that absolutely broke my heart. Tammy's family really stood up and gave impact statements yesterday, and that was so nice to see and hear. Because up until now, it's always been about JJ and Tylee. Tammy's been on the outskirts, but yesterday they made it about Tammy more so than JJ and Tylee, and I was happy to see that. The three of them lost their lives because of this, and all three of them deserve to be remembered yesterday, and boy, were they ever. There was stories about JJ from his grandmother. There was stories about Tylee from her aunt. And there was many stories about Tammy from several of her brothers and sisters. And then Kobe tied it off with remembering both JJ and Tylee. I do have to give credit to Tammy's family and vice versa, because in most of the statements, all three were remembered, not just JJ or Tylee or just Tammy. All three. These two families are forever connected because of the actions of Alex, Chad, and Lori. So while we're taking this victory for finally getting justice for JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, we also recognize that there's a lot of individuals who are still hurting deeply over this 5 years later. You're right, Pam, justice was served. And sometime this year, we are hoping that justice is also served for Charles, because that is the next case that will be happening with Lori Vallow. Idaho has had issues with their death penalty. Their last one did not go well. And from what I'm hearing, they are actually talking about bringing the firing squad back. So we are going to have to wait to see what kind of death penalty he will serve. But remember, like I said, there will be tons of appeals and nothing will happen for many years. He's going to have to sit in that prison and think about what he did and realize that it was wrong. And then one day be put to death. And Lori, she's just going to sit in prison for the rest of her life. So we'll see what happens. You never know. He did get the death sentence through the court, but jails are not very friendly. And Lori, we don't know what's going to happen with her in the years to come. Those individuals in jail do not take kindly to a mother killing her two children. Chad will be protected. He'll be on death row. But Lori, she's not going to be as protected. And we all know how jail justice is. But I wanted to come on here today and share the sentencing with you because I did not get to watch it when it happened. So I got to watch it with you. I've been waiting all night and all day for it to happen. And was a little busy when it did come on. So I decided to wait to watch it with all of you. Gibbo was watching CL final reel. Madrid scored, so thought This would be better because Madrid have won. Oh, wow. Hello, Miracle Hearts. So just say a prayer for those families, for everyone affected. Now that this part of the trial is over, there's going to be there's going to be downtime for them. And that's when things really hit the families the most. Because for the past 5 years, all they've been doing is fighting for justice for their loved one. Now that fight's not over. They're still fighting for Charles Vallow. But when it comes to Tylee, Tammy, and JJ, that part is over. And today and the future days are going to be tough on them. Yeah, they do go through so much, sadly. So our thoughts and prayers and love are with those families, their friends, and the community today. Now, this is not the only case that has received justice this week. Tomorrow, I will be coming on and talking about 2 more cases where there was a sentencing and a verdict. And that is the Jennifer Dulos trial. Actually, Jennifer Dulos is the victim. And that beautiful little boy whose father killed him by making him run on the treadmill. We will talk about those 2 trials tomorrow. Thank you so much for coming on and meeting with me and supporting the families of JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, and helping me, be happy that they finally received justice. I'll see you again tomorrow. Have a good day.